Good evening. Welcome to this Experiencing the Buddhist Teaching series. And good evening, Craig. Yeah. And we are going through the module on the good heart. So I have presented previously one method for cultivating the good heart, or this altruistic intention. It's called the sevenfold cause and effect method. So I thought I'd just start by just briefly reviewing it. The way I sort of present it, or I recommend, is purely from my point of view, how I view it. I encourage people to start where we are. So start by finding a way to connect with the loving kindness and compassion that we already have, to, in a way, reaffirm for ourselves that we do have these wonderful qualities within ourselves, with our own heart. And what we do need to do is to encourage it to come forth, to grow these qualities in our own life, in our interaction with others. So we start from where we are, with whatever amount of love and compassion we can manage at this point of time. So having connected with that, probably through meditation practice if you want, or just simply appreciate the different things that we do in our day-to-day life that are motivated by genuine love and compassion for ourselves and also for others. And starting with this, we can reflect a bit and consider what are the conditions, the preconditions that allow us to manifest love and compassion, and that actually help us to increase the intensity, expanding the scope of our love and compassion. So according to teaching, first and foremost, one of the preconditions is to be able to have a sense of relatedness to others, to another person. If I can feel related to this person, I feel that on some level I can connect with this person, then naturally I don't view this person as someone that is alien, other than me. I'm more likely to be able to include this person in so-called my same camp. So that's the first condition, relatedness, that I can relate to this person in some way, at some level. Doesn't mean that I need to agree with everything this person say or do. Doesn't mean that we need to be very similar. In fact, we can be very different. But nonetheless, I'm able to find something that allowed me to connect with this person. Even something that, such as something that allowed me to see this person is just like me. We're just human beings, trying to do our best in life. So the one reason I offer, which is the one that I find most helpful for myself, is to see this person as just like me, in wanting to be happy, trying hard to achieve our own definition of happiness, which could differ from one person to another. Or we are trying our best not to suffer. We don't like to suffer. We are trying to avoid suffering, avoid pain, and we're trying to doing our best to do it in doing so. And for me, just this one simple reason is enough for me to see this person as a fellow human being. Not so hard to relate to. Not that I necessarily agree with them or like them. I might not even like them, but I cannot deny the fact that I can see they're just like me. We are all human beings, really trying to do our best in life, so to speak. So relatedness is the first precondition. Once we are able to connect and relate, then there is a possibility for us to bring forth kindness, to respond with kindness and compassion, because this person is not so different from me, right? Not so radically different to the point as if they are some alien species. That's not true. On top of relatedness, another two preconditions point us to the kind of interaction we have with this person, mutual, or what I call reciprocal interactions. On top of feeling related, that I can relate to this person, if I can recollect the kindness that I receive from this person, the goodwill, the things that this person do for me that are beneficial, helpful, kind, supportive. And then what we give back in return. Hopefully, we are repaying likewise that kindness, that goodness. So the more we have this kind of wonderful interactions and connections, it helps to draw us closer together. Not only are you now related to me, you are now, in a way, much more closer to me because we have all this back and forth and to and fro, all these interactions, that sort of bond us together. And this becomes makes it even more readily for us to respond to you, to your happiness and your suffering with kindness and with compassion. Right, so these are the preconditions, and it's not so esoteric that I think we can relate to it, and especially if we take some time to give it some attention, to reflect a little bit and consider, then we might find that it is possible for us in our life, daily life, in our relationship, and others to find many examples to support this. And the more we reflect along this line, the more we think about how I can feel connected and related to the person, how I recollect in between the two of us, the reciprocal interaction, the positive interaction. Of course, no relationship is perfect. There's sometimes we have arguments, sometimes we hurt one another, but we focus on the positive aspects, the positive interaction. We can also find many examples to support that. And the more we are able to bring this to mind, we are aware of it, the easier it is for us to open our hearts, for us to express and manifest loving kindness and compassion. So having worked on that in this way, slowly, bit by bit, expanding the strength and the scope of our own loving kindness and compassion, then we can consider what is the next step. It's very natural for us as we feel stronger love and compassion for someone to come to a point where we feel that we have such a genuine concern for their welfare, that we feel somehow, in a way, we're willing to take on the responsibility. Not that we can make the person happy, but we can try to create the conditions, to facilitate that, to help them to be happy as much as we can. Or if they're suffering, we would like to do something to help, do something that would contribute to the lessening or to help them to be free from suffering. So this is a very natural tendency. This extension of kindness and compassion and genuine concern for others is to move towards a greater sense of responsibility, a much stronger intention to be proactive in helping them. And this, of course, in the Buddhist context, sometimes known as universal responsibility, especially when we eventually expand the scope to include everyone. And with universal responsibility, of course, we look to see what is the best way to go about helping others, to go about helping them to eliminate the causes of suffering, to help them to be equipped with the causes of happiness or genuine happiness. And this naturally brings us to the topic or the idea of bodhicitta, which is a Sanskrit word, Sanskrit word which normally we refer to in Buddhism as the good heart. It's a very special kind of good heart, so to speak. Bodhicitta sometimes translate as Bodhi means awakening or enlightenment. Chitta means mind or heart. So the heart or mind of awakening, of enlightenment. What it actually means is the mind and heart that aspire to enlightenment. Aspire to enlightenment in order to work for the welfare of all sentient beings, in order to benefit all sentient beings. So it's a very particular state of mind. In fact, this is of course talking within the Buddhist context. Not everyone would generate this state of mind because, first of all, we need to enhance the quality of loving kindness and compassion to the extent that we go beyond beyond the very limited scope of concern that most of us are probably at. With limited people that we feel that we care about. Anything beyond we felt it's too much. So it takes a while to expand that scope of concern. And also we need to think in a very specific way, how to go about helping them. In this context of Buddhism, they say that the best way to help everyone is to achieve enlightenment, to become a Buddha. Now, I don't think anyone walking down the street will naturally think in this way. Some of us may think that the best way to help others is to eliminate poverty or to enhance equality and so on and so on. There's many different ways we would consider could be helpful to others. And so this is definitely well within the Buddhist context. From the point of view of the Buddhist teaching, the best way to really help others to be free from suffering and to achieve happiness is actually for oneself first to achieve enlightenment and then to show the way to others. The same way that the historical Buddha has done. Yeah, he himself, Siddhartha, has achieved the state of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and then spent the remaining 45 years traveling around, spreading his message, his teachings, which many people learned, study, practice, and achieve their own liberation and enlightenment on the basis of those teachings. So this is the way to think about it that enable us to generate this mind of enlightenment or awakening called bodhicitta. Right, so this is just a very brief kind of summary of what we have covered previously related to this method called sevenfold cause and effect for generating this altruistic intention of bodhicitta. It's called sevenfold cause and effect because the first 6 points, which I call, I should give it the proper name. The first one I say to see others as someone we can relate to, that we are related to, or tradition is called seeing all sentient beings as our mothers. And then the next 2 points to do with the reciprocal interaction we have with others, to think about the kindness we receive from others, and then what we have done in return to repay the kindness. So remembering the kindness of all mother sentient beings and having the wish to repay the kindness of all other sentient beings. Plus, the 4th will be the quality of loving kindness, generating loving kindness. 5th is compassion. 6th is universal responsibility. So these 6 points are regarded as causes and conditions, leading up to the 7th, which is the mind of bodhicitta, or altruism itself. So, I hope that makes some sense and give you some idea. This is a very practical method. Even if we may not feel ready, we don't feel ready to be, we don't think of ourselves as that altruistic. Nonetheless, in our day-to-day life, it is still very helpful to see if we can encourage the growth or the quality of kindness and compassion within ourselves, and especially in our interaction with others. Because these two really such wholesome qualities of the heart contribute greatly to not only to our own happiness and well-being, but also to the happiness and well-being of others. And definitely really transform the way we relate to the different people in our life. And regardless of the scope of our concerns, we all start with maybe a fairly small scope of concern, small group of people, those that we are directly related to, our family, loved ones, our close friends, and so forth. But as the quality of kindness and compassion grow, it is not impossible for us to slowly expand the scope of concern and to start to see that others are just as worthy of, just as in need of our love and compassion. So today I want to move on to the second method of cultivating a good heart, called equalizing and exchanging self and others, or self with others. Equalizing and exchanging self with others, it doesn't mean that we become others and others become us. Yeah. The exchanging of self and others, more probably we should say equalizing, exchanging the concern between concern for self and concern for others. Or sometimes they use the word cherishing self and cherishing others. So the idea is that at the moment we might be more self-absorbed, maybe more caught up in self-concern, more preoccupied with self. In other words, we might be more selfish, self-centered. And to exchange that kind of attitude, so much so that we start to become concerned with others. We start to cherish others in place of selfishness, in place of this self-centeredness. So that is the whole aim of this method, is to approach it from this point of view, equalizing and exchanging self with others. So it starts with equalizing, because in order for us to exchange, we have to start from a point of view where we don't see others as so different from self. Because at the moment, especially when moments of strong selfishness and self-concern, the self is so much more important than others, isn't it? It's almost like look after number one, and there is only one number one, which is me. My greatest concern is myself, and everyone else, no matter how close to me, secondary. So they are not equal to me in terms of whether receiving my attention and my concern, so to speak. So long as there's this inequality, then it is not possible for us to even consider why would I want to exchange self with others. Me is clearly more important than anybody else on earth. Yeah. So the first point already point to quite a challenge. How can we overcome this natural tendency for us on certain occasions? I don't mean that we all the time, but on certain occasions, we manifest selfishness, self-centeredness. We manifest this very natural inclination and instinct to preserve the self, to view the self as the most important, and therefore that concern definitely influence how we see things, the choices we make, the actions we undertake to safeguard one's own benefits, welfare over and above that of others. So it's a way of overcoming selfishness, so to speak. And then on that basis, to go one step even further. Previously, I see the self as all important and others as not important. And the teaching is saying, why not consider that there will be a day where, for some reason, you actually experience it in the opposite way. You actually are more concerned of the welfare of others over and above our own welfare. Others somehow are so much more significant and important than the happiness or the suffering of oneself. Right? And so there is a reversal of attitude, so to speak. Whether it's really possible or not is something we should consider. But nonetheless, I think we all know at certain times for certain people, this is actually quite true. They manifest selfless behavior, selfless actions. They sacrifice themselves for the benefit of others. And That could be true in the case of one single incident, or can be true in the case of or a whole duration of time. So it is not impossible, actually, for human beings to put others above self, to be able to have this kind of vision and this quality of genuine loving kindness and compassion in their heart, that they actually value the happiness and suffering of others above their own. Yeah. And this method is to see if we can actually replicate that in ourselves and to encourage ourselves to move in that direction. So first point, equalizing. Before I go into the details, I find this second method quite challenging because a lot of the details of the method contrast self with others. And as the technique goes, is to get us to give up what they call self-cherishing or self-centeredness, and to shift our attention to cherishing others. Yeah. So it's sort of contrasting self, this notion of self, with others. And on paper, in theory, it seems quite straightforward. Well, we just exchange the two, no? Previously, you are selfish, you are self-centered. Now you are not selfish, you are other-centered. You care only about others, you care for others more than yourself, and that's the end of the story. Sounds so noble, isn't it? But in actual practice, it seems, at least for me, it seems quite complicated. There are all these occasions and situations where I start to question and ask, of course, the typical question: what about me? What about me? What about my welfare? What about my happiness? Is it really that unimportant? Does it mean that I should just suffer? Suffer in silence, and just give everything away, suffer in silence, and stop and quit complaining and get on with it. Right? Somehow I don't quite agree with that. Maybe my selfishness is much stronger, but I think there must be somewhere between this self and others, cherishing self versus cherishing others, set up as a opposite end. Somewhere along there, I feel that there must be a way of finding a place for genuine concern and care for oneself out of love and compassion. Self-preservation seems to be a strong behavior. Of course, otherwise we will be dead, won't be around. Yeah. Selfishness, self-preservation, preoccupation with self, of course, is a very natural tendency. Yeah. But that aside, even when we are not selfish, I think there is a rightful place to ask, where does taking care of oneself, in a balanced, healthy way, wholesome way, where does that fit in this presentation of self-centeredness versus cherishing others? Is there not a legitimate place for me to be able to care for myself and yet at the same time not be selfish? Is there a place for me to say no to some requests, say no to some requests from others, and still be justified in doing so as a way of taking care of myself, acknowledging my own limitation and constraints? So I think for me it's important in this method or in this presentation to be able to achieve that balance. And this is particularly so because I'm like some people, I don't think I'm the only one in the world where I am somehow afflicted with a kind of self-image. Self-image. I think I'm much better now. When I was younger, the self-image where somehow you feel, or at least I feel, not good enough. I feel that I have a tendency in the past to beat myself. If I make a mistake, it seems to be like the worst disaster in the world. How could I possibly do that? So a kind of fundamental dislike towards oneself. I would say, or maybe I do, at moments of self-hatred, actually. Yeah. Now, someone with this kind of view of the self, of course, it's easy for us to put down ourselves, put down ourselves because that's what we should do. Otherwise, we have been selfish, and we must always put others above our own concerns. But I think that is not a recipe for genuine love and compassion. It's not a recipe for healthy growth. It's also not a recipe for liberation and enlightenment. So that set me off. Self-image is about finding your own personality. I'll come back to that. So I think so that's why I thought a lot about this particular method, equalizing and exchanging self with others. Human nature imperfection. Okay, so this is what I come up with. And this is my interpretation of this method. It's a little bit complicated. I have complicated the picture a bit because I simply cannot accept this sort of contrasting anything to do with the self, taking care of yourself or whatever, as self-centeredness, and we have to give that up and solely cherish others. Okay, so let me sort of present my take on this, and then you see whether it is reasonable or not. No one is perfect. Okay, so I think a lot of it has to do with self-centeredness, has to do with holding on to certain kind of self-image, certain idea of self. Now, this idea of self, this image of self, is not who we are, but it's how we perceive ourselves or how others perceive us. We all have images and ideas of ourselves and others. Yeah. So we perceive ourselves in a certain way, and some of those ways are accurate, wonderful. That means you know yourself very well, which is great. But nonetheless, some of us are holding on to a certain image and idea of ourselves that are inaccurate, they are distorted. Of course, it can be distorted in different ways. Some people may see themselves as perfect. You look into the mirror and say, I'm such a wonderful person. How could no one actually notice it? I am so wonderful. I'm so perfect. Now, that is a self-image of oneself. Maybe you might disagree, but clearly we have encountered people who hold themselves in high regard. Sometimes I think that is not necessarily justified. But nonetheless, that's how some of us perceive ourselves as perfect, not almost perfect. Yeah. Then, of course, there are other group of us that have other kind of distorted self-image, like what I mentioned just now, the self-image in which we view ourselves in a very negative light. We somehow pick on all the negative and bad things and we gather them together, and that is how I view myself. And we react to that with a lot of sense of shame, guilt maybe, and also even more unfortunate, a sense of unworthiness, unworthiness, almost an unworthiness to exist, and definitely not worthy of love and kindness from others. Now, that is, I think, very much a reality for some of us. So these are examples of distorted, what I would regard distorted self-image, in the sense that the image does not accord with the reality of who we are. Now, holding on to such distorted self-image, we can get very preoccupied with that image, the idea of self, to the extent that it influences everything, influence our experience, influence the way we perceive things, influence the way we think, we feel, and therefore the way we respond and behave. If I hold on to this exaggerated, perfect image of self, then it has great impact on how this person may see myself and others, and how I think, how I feel, how I behave. Sometimes these days we talk about narcissistic personality, someone who think of themselves as so good and so important. So that is one example of one form of self-centeredness. The self in the term self-centeredness is interpreted by me as holding on to a particular kind of self-image, one that is distorted, one that does not accord with reality. Nonetheless, it has tremendous power to affect the perception, the experience, the behavior of the person. Likewise, the same, even though it's completely opposite, holding on to a self-image of oneself as being bad, or damaged, or as unworthy, and so on and so forth. Holding on to that self-image, again, it distorts everything. It distorts our perception of things, how we interpret our experiences. It affects the thinking, the feeling, and therefore also the behavior, the choices we make. That is also another form of self-centeredness. Although radically opposite, but nonetheless it's still centered and still preoccupied with a distorted self-image. Now, if we understand self-centeredness in this way, we can see how when we are self-centered in this way, we are not in touch with reality, and therefore our behavior, our choices, our actions, even though we are trying to be happy, to avoid suffering, nonetheless they will fail, because we sort of got it wrong, we got reality wrong, and therefore that mistakes filter down into all our perception and our behavior, our interaction, our relationship with others. Not only does it not contribute to our happiness, it actually actively creates suffering for ourselves and also suffering for others. And this is how I understand as self-centeredness. Okay. Now it's easy for us to say no one is perfect, human nature is imperfect. But if we look around us, we will find that actually perfectionism is not so rare. It's because human beings have this tendency to project perfection. We don't project it onto ourselves, we project it onto others because we long for that perfection. So we need to be quite mindful of when we engage in such projection. Someone who views themselves in a negative light has an even stronger tendency, let's say in a relationship, to project the good, the perfect onto the other party, and then become attached to that person, rather become attached to the image of the person. Because it is only by entering into a relationship with such a person, as we perceive it, we feel that this is the source of my happiness. This is how I can complete myself. And of course, we can imagine a relationship on the basis of such a distorted perception and projection. May not turn out well because we are not interacting with one another on the basis of reality. We are interacting with one another on the basis of certain fantasy or unrealistic expectations. Okay, so the self-centeredness is, as I explained and as I try to define it, involve centering our attention around a self, but this self or this self-image is not an accurate one, it's a distorted one. So in other words, I'm holding on to a distorted image of myself, and it has this grasping onto that self-image. It has this ability to distort everything. And also it has a tendency to draw my attention, to become preoccupied with such a self. Okay? And this is contrasted with what we call cherishing others. Now in this case, the other, I interpret it as to see things as they are, or as much as possible. So I see that as reality-centered, to be able to see ourselves, others, as close as possible to reality, to be free from that distortion, to be free from holding onto mistaken images and ideas, and then on that basis to relate to one another. So there's the contrast is between self-centered and reality-centered. There's a contrast between a distorted view of reality versus an as accurate as possible we can get a view of reality. And that's actually what we are equalizing, what we are exchanging. We're trying to exchange the current mistaken, distorted preoccupation with of self, mistaken self-image, with something that is more accurate, that is more in touch with reality. And hopefully we can see that in so doing, we will be able to improve our relationship with others, that we will be better able to express genuine loving kindness and compassion towards others and also towards ourselves. Because once we are free from those distorted self-image, we can see ourselves as who we are. Not just the personality, but also to be able to see ourselves in a more balanced way, that we are equipped with positive qualities, and of course we also have some bad habits, unwholesome habits. So we are a mixture of all these different aspects, and yet nonetheless we are be able to hold all this and be able to relate to ourselves with kindness, compassion, with genuine concern. Okay, so this is my very complicated introduction to this topic of equalizing and exchanging self with others. So let's start with the first point, equalizing self with others. How can I come to regard self and others in a way that is more equal? How can I find that commonality between self and others? Of course, me and others are different. I'm I, and the rest of you are who you are. There's no way that we can sort of completely be absolutely equal in all ways. So that's not what we are trying to do. But we are trying to see if we can find a reason, a condition, whereby we can justify to ourselves that others, just like me, are worthy of concern, worthy of loving kindness, of compassion. So much so that there is not such a big difference between self and others in terms of importance, in terms of the need for concern, so to speak. Right? And me being lazy, I having found one reason that works for me, has a tendency to reuse the same reasoning. And that reasoning is that to think to myself, I and others, every single human beings, you can even expand it to include all sentient beings. Each and every one of us have the same innate desire or wish to be happy and to not suffer. Okay, so just as I previously explained, we will define happiness differently. For sure that my happiness and the happiness of my friend or my enemies or whoever, will be different. We define happiness differently. My happiness and my friend's pet dog will have a very different definition of what is happiness. But what we are pointing to is we both desire and wish for to be happy. And also, we both do not want to suffer. Now, this is, for me, a great equalizer, because when I meditate on this, I will ask myself, so compare myself with a whole bunch of people. We all have different definition of happiness and suffering. We all strive for happiness in a different ways. We adopt different means, different strategies. But is it possible for me to say that compared to another person, my wish for happiness is so much stronger than this person? Because my wish to be happy is so much stronger, therefore it is more important. Is it possible for me to say that this person, yes, they want to be happy, but not as strong as me? No. I think it's okay for them. They may say, oh, it will be all right if I'm happy, but it's fine if I'm not happy. Can I genuinely say that about another person? That they don't really want to be happy, seriously. It's okay for them. They would say, oh, if I'm happy, I'm fine, but I will accept if I'm unhappy. Is that true? I think no. No. Their wish to be happy is just as strong as my wish to be happy. Their wish to not suffer is equal in strength to my wish to not suffer. Of course, there are differences because if we define suffering differently, then it will manifest in different way. But deep down within myself, within me, I cannot point to anyone and say that I don't think this person really want to be free from suffering. I don't think this person really want to be happy. I think that is not true. Each and every one of us in our own way, sincerely from the bottom of our heart, want to be happy and not suffer. And for me, that is the great equalizer. That if I take my point of view outside of myself, instead of just thinking of myself, as an impartial observer, someone were to look among this whole group of people, including myself, this person will most likely be impartial and unbiased, would say that, oh, I think each one of you all wants to be happy and all don't want to suffer. I will not be singled out as the person whose happiness is so much more important than anybody else, and whose suffering is so much more important to the entire universe than the rest of them. So we are all equal in that sense. So by thinking in this way, we equalize self with others. That even though we may disagree with this person, we disagree with their definition, we definitely disagree with the means they adopt to trying to be happy. I might think that the means that they adopt is actually harmful and destructive. So I disagree with this person. And that is true, that's possible. In fact, that is definitely true in many instances. But what I cannot deny is this person is really trying his or her best to find their happiness and to avoid suffering. Okay, so sounds very theoretical, but the important thing is, if possible, to go beyond this intellectual, theoretical kind of consideration, to be able to feel it in our own heart, to be able to see another person and recognize in our own heart that, oh, this person is just like me. We are equal in that we are both trying our best to secure happiness. We are both trying our best to not experience pain, to avoid suffering. And to see if we can actually have a heartfelt response in that way. So I hope that makes some sense. And this is the first step in this method to achieve a kind of a view where we can relate to others, relate to every single sentient being from this point of view, and to understand that there is this great equality among us. So let's do a meditation on this, and so that we all have an opportunity to play around with this idea, to turn it around in our own head and mind. And I invite you to do it. I mean, you can do it with a stranger, but I think it's more powerful to do it in relation to the different people that we know close to us, especially someone you just have an argument with, and you are really pissed off with this person. Maybe if you think from that point of view, the both of you, regardless of whatever you're arguing and fighting over, are just trying in your own way to be happy and to not suffer. Would that possibly make a difference or not? Yeah. So it is very poignant for me, and I think very powerful when we can see our loved ones in this different light. Since you know them very well, you know the difference among one another very well. See whether this way of reflecting and thinking may help you go beyond focusing on the differences, focusing on the disagreements and the arguments, to see something that we both share and we are exactly equal in that way. All right, so I will guide you in this meditation. Meditation itself is quite kind of simple because there's only just one argument, one point to think over and reflect. But I hope you would consider it in the light of the different relationship you have with different people, and try to see the other party, the other person, in this new light, in this different light, and see whether is it possible for you to invoke some heartfelt response and feelings, and see what happens. Right? So take a few moments. I invite you to adopt a suitable meditation posture. Make sure that in the posture you have adopted, the back and spine feels comfortable. So you can sit on a chair like what I'm doing. You can sit on the floor. You can also lie down, lie on your back in the supine position. Keeping the spine comfortable without causing unnecessary tension or pain. We settle our body into the meditation posture. We allow the body some time at the beginning of the meditation to adjust itself, to find its way into the posture. And more importantly, we give the body time to loosen up, to unwind a bit, to put aside tension, tightness that are unnecessary, so that it can find its way to settle down comfortably into the posture. A good way to facilitate this softening, this loosening up, is actually to start with the face. So often we unconsciously tense up the muscles of our face. Some of us may habitually tense up the muscles of the forehead, or contract the muscles around the eyes, or unconsciously we may be clenching the jaw, tightening the muscles of the jaw. So now I invite you, place your attention at the face. Notice whether are there any tensions in the face. If there are, see if it's possible for us to somehow persuade those muscles to relax, to invite into our own face a feeling of softness, a sense of ease, comfort, and relaxation. We try to keep the face soft, relaxed, at ease throughout the meditation, to remind ourselves that it's not necessary for us to sustain all those kind of tension and tightenings. We don't have to contract the muscles. Instead, we can simply allow the body to release all those unnecessary contractions and tightenings, to really settle down into the posture. And to settle the mind into meditation. For the first few minutes, rest our attention on the sensations of the breath within the body, making use of the soothing sensations of the breath as a way of helping our mind to release any agitation, breathing in and out. See if we can place mindful awareness on those breath sensations, and especially on the out breath. See if we can make use of this opportunity to release. Breathing out, releasing the carbon dioxide from the lungs. Maybe we can also release and let go of the different thoughts that preoccupying our mind, thoughts of worry or anxiety. Coming back to the breath, experiencing the in-breath and the out-breath. And each time we notice an out-breath, see if we can remind ourselves to release. Breathing out, maybe some of the discomfort, tightness in the body may flow away with the breath. And likewise, the images, the words, the ongoing inner commentary in the mind, maybe some of this will also flow away with the breath. So the breath can be a support for our attention throughout this meditation. Any point of time, if we feel that we get very distracted or confused or unsure, simply invite our attention to just come back and rest on the breath. And as we breathe out, to deepen the sense of release. Now I'm going to invite you to begin with a reflection related to ourselves. Get in touch with this natural innate desire that we have within ourselves, that we want to be happy and we do not want to suffer. See if you can recollect the different instances throughout our life, different occasions where we notice this innate desire, this innate wish manifest itself. There are many, many occasions, of course, since deep down within each one of us, this is what we really wish for, aspire for, and work towards finding happiness and avoiding suffering. Is it possible for us to recollect now instances that support this claim? Can we see ourselves as we make the choice, as we engage in that behavior for the sake of finding happiness for ourselves, for the sake of avoiding or freeing ourselves from suffering? And of course, hopefully we are able to call to mind many instances where we make wise choices, we carry out suitable actions to secure our own happiness, to prevent or reduce or free ourselves from suffering. And maybe we can also recollect instances where maybe we made bad choices, we react in an unskillful way, and yet still see those choices and behavior as in service of this innate wish. We are still trying our best to be happy and to not suffer. And then let's turn our attention to someone close to us, someone we know fairly well, someone in our family, amongst close friends, our loved ones. Just choose one of them. And now we consider based on what we know of this person. Is it possible for us to also bring to mind, in relation to this person, a different expression of that same innate wish of how this person are just like me, trying very hard to be happy and to not suffer? Can we point to instances, choices, actions, behavior of this person that affirm that he or she also has this innate wish for happiness and freedom from suffering? And now that we have confirmed for ourselves that both of us want to be happy and to not suffer, can we say that my wish to be happy is much stronger than this person? My wish to not suffer is much stronger than his or hers. Or maybe we have to admit that despite our differences, each one of us strongly intend, with the same intention, wishing to be happy and to not suffer. That we may go about achieving our goal differently, that we may define happiness and suffering differently, and that there are many disagreements and differences between us. But nonetheless, each one of us, sincerely from the bottom of our heart, equally wants to be happy and not suffer. And I invite you to expand the scope of this reflection, move from one person to another, and repeat it. Repeat it for the other people within your circle of concerns. So much so that to see if we can regard all these people as just like me. We are all equal in wishing to be happy, trying our best to find that elusive happiness, and really trying our best to not suffer. So I'll keep quiet for now and allow you to do your reflection. And having reflected in relation to the different peoples in our life, now is a good time for us to honor the same innate wish within each one of us. Returning the focus to ourselves, touching or pointing to this innate natural wish we find within ourselves, wishing to be happy and not suffer. Excuse me. Is it possible for us to bring forth sincerely from the bottom of our hearts the sincere wish of loving kindness and compassion, and wish it upon ourselves? May I be happy. May I find happiness and the causes of happiness. May I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And likewise, turn our attention to another person, honoring his or her innate wish. And in the same way, sincerely, from the bottom of our hearts, wish for this person. May you find happiness and the causes of happiness. May you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And we do that for each person within our inner circle of concern. And we expand the scope of consideration, thinking to ourselves that every single human being we meet, we have met, or will meet, will be exactly equal to me. Each one of us has the same wish, to the same intensity, the same strength, wanting to be happy and to not suffer. And more than that, we can expand it to include all sentient beings, each and every sentient being, everywhere, throughout times, are just like me, equal to me in wanting to be happy and to not suffer. Okay, equalizing self with other on the basis of this single reason that we all are equipped with the same wish for happiness and to avoid suffering. It's actually a very powerful idea that has many practical use in our daily life. In fact, if we sincerely take this on board, we cannot say from this point on, when we encounter any person, that quite often we do say, oh, I don't understand this person. How could they possibly do something like that? But from this point on, you can actually understand each and every one of them. You may not, of course, know the precise thought process that go on in them. You may not know the precise details of what they want or what they seek and why they end up doing what they have done. But there's one thing we do know that we can relate to and we can understand. One way or another, in a very wise or twisted way, they're just like me. Whatever they have done or they're doing, they're simply trying to be happy and to not suffer. That is quite understandable, isn't it? We may not, as I said, appreciate that. We may not agree with it, but nonetheless, we can somehow see where they're coming from, because in some way they are the same as us. Yeah. And also this one single idea can, just as we did previously, help us feel a kind of connection with this person. Maybe sometimes we don't really want that connection. We want to fashion the other person, the other party, as completely alien and idiot and stupid and so different to me that there's no way I can relate to them. But I think with this single idea, we have to say that that's not true. I actually can relate to this person, even though I might disagree. So for me, I think it is a very powerful idea, one that, although seemingly very simple, almost simple-minded, but if we are willing to work on it and think about it and bring it into our daily life, our daily interactions with others, we can often able to see how that we can, in some way, on some level, understand others, understand their choices, and relate to them in that sense. Yeah. Okay, so this is the equalizing self with others. If we are successful, then we can really see that on this level, there is not much difference between self and others. We are all trying our best in that sense. Yeah. And building on this, we have to move forward in our practice to overcome self-centeredness. And self-centeredness is an interesting state of mind, that actually we all experience it on one point or another. Maybe we can appreciate if I talk about occasions where we suffer from road rage. Yeah. Road rage is when somehow we feel that our rights or whatever it is been violated by others. There's this intense rising of anger and rage, isn't it? In that moment, of course, it would be unlikely for us to be mindful of what it is, but the sense of self is very, very strong. And you'll find that all the thoughts, the considerations, and feelings spiral around the sense of self. This is a very typical way in which self-centeredness manifests. It's almost like, I think of it as a black hole, because there seems to be this intense gravitational force that, regardless of what it is, be it our perception of the situation, our thoughts, our feelings, different consideration, everything comes under the influence and kind of the gravity of the self-centeredness, the self in the middle. They all twist and turn around it, until almost as if there is no other way to think and to feel except from the point of view of the self at the middle. This is self-centeredness. And I myself will notice it if someone upset me, if I get really angry. That's true in the heat of the moment, but even after the event, the mind repeatedly will go back to that incident and replay in the mind, and there will be very typical series of thoughts thinking about that incident, and those thoughts will have the same kind of pattern. They all spiral around me self, And in fact, the more I think in this way, the more my anger will grow and intensify. And that is one way in which self-centeredness manifests. It manifests by turning our perceptions, our thoughts, our feelings, our reaction, and cause them to spiral around the focal point of self. And I'm saying that, of course, it will be hard for us to examine. It takes a lot of mindfulness. That self that is at the center of this vortex of thoughts, feelings, and emotions is actually an idea of self, a kind of self-image. It's almost like saying, how dare you do that to me? Yeah. The me, of course, is this self-image. A few days ago, my friend, we have this Dharma discussion, and she was saying that when she was very upset, very angry, she noticed that feeling that anger is this sense of entitlement. There's a word, entitlement, almost as if we are saying that we are entitled to certain experiences, certain things, and somehow the universe or this other person is not giving us what we are entitled. And so we are so upset, we are pissed off. How could you not give me what I feel is rightfully mine? It's my entitlement. So that entitlement, the sense of entitlement, is how we feel is tied up within that image, the self-image. And the self-image is feels that, and sometimes we feel it not just to the people around us, we feel it towards the entire universe. That we are entitled to certain treatments, we are entitled to certain things, certain experiences. And when we are disappointed or someone or something get in our way, we are furious about it. How dare you get in my way? And she said that she feels that she's behaving like a spoiled child, that has somehow been disappointed by parents or in this case, disappointed by the universe. And as a result, as a reaction to that, strong anger flare out. So I'm not sure whether that makes any sense to you or whether you don't have to agree with me. I invite you to think a little bit about this. And this is what I mean by self-centeredness. Yeah. It's not actually self-centeredness is something very different from self-concern, genuine self-concern. It's very different from taking care of myself, looking after oneself, looking into one's genuine needs and trying to fulfill those needs, or trying to be healthy, be well, be happy. There is a place for legitimate, genuine concern for ourselves. And I'm trying to differentiate these two for you, to see that saying self-centeredness doesn't mean taking care of ourselves. So there are times where we are in a situation where maybe we need to draw some boundaries, to protect ourselves and to say no to someone else, especially when we feel that the request or the demand is not something that we can meet. So doing so, saying no in that context, is not being selfish, it's not being self-centered. Right? So maybe I'm belaboring a point that is very obvious to all of you, but I still feel it's necessary to highlight this point because having been in Buddhist circle for a long time, it's not uncommon to come across instances where people feel that since I need to abandon self-centeredness, that means I am not allowed to think or do anything for myself. Of course, not literally, because otherwise we will be dead, right? Because we need to eat, we need to drink, we need to visit a doctor. But nonetheless, there is this strong idea in quite a lot of people's head that in those situations, to consider my own needs, to take care of myself is been self-centered. And I think that is not right. And so it's important when we approach this topic to really try to sort it out among us within our own head and mind, the difference between self-centeredness and genuine self-concern. Because otherwise, we are literally going to set ourselves up to become doormats. Yeah, and this is unfortunately very common. Take another example in the case of compassion, right? These days, things are changing. There's a lot of talk in meditation circle, spiritual circle about the concept of self-compassion, that it is perfectly legitimate to have compassion for ourselves as well. It's important to have compassion for others, especially to see their suffering, to try to relieve their suffering. Likewise, it is just as important to have compassion for ourselves, to treat ourselves with compassion and to help ourselves to be free from suffering. In case you think I'm just making it up, teaching meditation for so many years, very often outside of meditation, people are fine, but somehow when they start to meditate, their mind starts to think differently. They fall asleep in their meditation, which I think is a perfectly common things and normal things to do, especially if I make you meditate after lunch. Right? In other occasions, we are fine. We fall asleep. We don't feel bad about it. We don't beat ourselves up. We think that, oh well, no, too bad, But somehow, when it comes to meditation, and if we do fall asleep in meditation, sometimes for very good reason, because we're exhausted, we're tired, the temperature is too warm, it just so happened at that point of time of the day, energy is very low, naturally we fall asleep or we are just chronically sleep deprived. In that occasion, within the meditation, if we fall asleep, it's so common to find people get very frustrated with themselves. They get very upset with themselves. They feel that, oh, I'm a failure in meditation. This is terrible. This is a bad session. And you can go on and on, feeling really bad about it or really upset by it. When in actual fact, all it happened is you have fallen asleep. That's it. We fall asleep all the time at different occasions, depending on the conditions. But why do we feel so bad? Because is it because I'm meditating, therefore I'm not allowed to fall asleep? It's simply a no-no for it to happen. But then again, you didn't choose to fall asleep, isn't it? It happens, it comes upon you. It is an experience that we encounter and something we can work with and change the conditions in the future. So in that occasions, we manifest, I would see quite often, a lack of self-compassion. Lack of self-compassion, almost saying that compassion is something that is only applied to others and not to self. Yeah, and I'm trying to say at this point of time is that's not true. There's occasion where we can express loving concern for ourselves. Very important, in fact, to have loving concern for ourselves, to have compassion for ourselves, to be able to discern clearly when and what is genuine concern for ourselves and when we are being self-centered. Right? So I hope that this, self-centered is actually a source of great suffering. Self-centered is not self-concern. Self-centeredness may, on a superficial level, seems to be working for our happiness, working to protect us from suffering. Self-centeredness is also not self-preservation. Self-preservation is a pretty broad term to refer to a lot of behaviors and reactions. Now, self-centeredness is not to be equated with self-preservation. As I said, self-centeredness is really a kind of reaction, a kind of reactivity, spiral around a certain image and idea of self that distort our thinking, our perception, our feeling, and our reaction. And when it manifests, it seems to be working for our benefit. But in fact, if we think about all those occasions, we realize that its true function is that it destroys the peace of mind, destroy our peace of mind. It escalates intensify a lot of unwholesome, unhelpful qualities. It tends to lead us to react in ways that are not helpful, and which may even be harmful to ourselves, harmful to others, harmful to our relationship with others. And therefore, self-centeredness is something that we need to become aware of, be aware of its negative consequences, and to start to free our attention from this kind of habits, this habitual way of reacting and seeing the world and our reality. And this is very important, to not see self-centeredness as in service of our happiness and freedom from suffering, and rather to view it as actually destroying our chances of happiness, harming the peace of our mind, and actually increasing our suffering, and over above that, harming our relationship with others. Yeah. So this week I don't have time to go into the meditative practice that to do for working with self-centeredness, but I hope having touched on this topic, maybe in the days to come, if you're so inclined, you might want to reflect a little bit, maybe recollect or maybe even observe instances where we react to something. And we can ask ourselves, in those instances, are we manifesting self-centeredness, or is it an expression of genuine self-concern? And to be able to tell the two apart is very important, because what we want to keep and enhance is this genuine loving kindness and compassion towards oneself. And what we want to identify and to diminish and to weaken is self-centeredness. The self-centeredness is actually not helping me. Instead, it is harming me. So this is the second point. After equalizing self and with others, we are asked to reflect and to see the disadvantages of self-centeredness. That actually self-centeredness is not in service of ourselves. It doesn't bring us happiness, doesn't prevent suffering. Instead, it increases our suffering and destroys our happiness. And until we are convinced about that, we will find that again and again, we will fall back into this habit. We'll fall back into this way of reacting, our self-centeredness. Yeah. Okay, still have a few more minutes. Is there any comments and questions on what I have presented today? Self-image sometimes is also, for some people, perfection is an element of that self-image. And genuine concern for self is to be able to acknowledge our imperfection and not feel that there is a terrible thing. The fact that we occasionally make mistakes, as it is human to err, that we fall short of our highest expectation of ourselves, all this can be held with compassion and kindness. On the other hand, we find that we are constantly beating ourselves, we are disappointed with ourselves, we are upset with ourselves because we somehow didn't live up to the standard, we didn't live up to our expectations, we somehow failing, we are very harsh critics of ourselves. Then we can suspect that there is some kind of the certain idea or image of self we are holding on to is something quite unrealistic, and instead of helping us, it's actually creating all this suffering for us. Yeah. Okay, if there is no questions or comments, then I think that's it for this session. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good week ahead, and next week we'll continue with exchanging self with others. Thank you.